I will now turn the time over to our keynote speaker. I'm sorry to take some.
No, you're fine.
I didn't take any of your time because we'll infringe on the break. And Kara Dassel from the Utah Geriatric Education Consortium. And her title is Alzheimer's, Embracing the Present and Preparing for the Future. And can I just say this, Dr. Dassel has been wonderful. She's been so supportive, and not only just emotionally and intellectually, but financially too. You have done so much for us. Thank you very much. Dr. Dassel.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural Lynden Legacy Caregiver Conference. I'm honored to have been asked to serve as the keynote speaker for this event. So thank you, Dr. Blanche and Katie and Suzette. So Suzette used to be one of my students in our gerontology interdisciplinary program. She earned her certificate. And so that is my connection to this wonderful group. So thank you for the invitation. So as Dr. Blanche said, I am a faculty member in the College of Nursing at the University of Utah, and I oversee our gerontology interdisciplinary program. Another hat that I wear is that I'm the community education lead for our Utah Geriatric Education Consortium, which I'll talk about at the end of my presentation. But today what I want to talk about is this long caregiving journey that you all are very familiar with, and how to embrace the present but also plan for the future. So in my presentation, I'm going to provide a brief overview of dementia, just to even the playing field of knowledge. There may be some of you who are brand new to this world of dementia and are just learning the very basics. There may be some of you who could write a book on dementia and know all about it. But just so that we're all on the same page, I'm going to provide an overview, including the various stages of dementia. Then I'm going to talk about planning for the future and why that is so important for both you as a caregiver and for the individual with dementia. Then, as Dr. Blanche said, I'm going to talk about caring for the caregiver. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. This is a long journey, and self-care is not selfish. And you need to be at your best to provide the best care. So we'll talk about that. And then I'm going to share some resources, and many of these are actually out in the lobby. So I encourage you during the break to go talk to our vendors and learn about the resources that are available here in the community. And then I'll allow time for questions and answers at the end, and hopefully not infringe on the break. So the most common question I receive when I give presentations like this is, what is the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? So I'm going to talk about that. Dementia is a collection of symptoms related to cognitive decline. Cognitive is just a fancy word for thinking skills. This decline can include those thinking skills, behavioral changes, and psychological symptoms. And this is all caused by biological changes in the brain that we'll talk about a little bit more. Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia. So just like with cancer, it's an umbrella term, and there's lots of different types of cancer, there are lots of different types of dementia, which is a term for a general decline in intellectual functioning. So Alzheimer's disease accounts for 60 to 80% of cases, and that's why those terms are used interchangeably a lot. But I recognize that you all are caregivers for a variety of different types of dementia. That may be vascular dementia caused by a stroke in the brain, Lewy body dementia, which is caused by a different type of protein, and frontotemporal dementia that affects this frontal part of our brain. And the more we're learning in the research world is that they're not isolated types of dementia. In up to 50% of cases, there's a mixture of the different brain pathologies going on. So someone may have Alzheimer's disease pathology and some evidence of stroke or vascular changes. So there's a lot of overlap in the dementia world. There are some causes of cognitive decline that mimic dementia, but they can be reversible. So this is another reason to see your doctor early, because some reversible types of dementia include vitamin deficiencies like vitamin B12, hypothyroidism, If your glucose is too high, if you're having sleep problems, depression, there's a lot of things that can affect our thinking skills. And some of those are reversible. There's a great video that I'd like to share with you all. It's 3 minutes and it gives a wonderful overview of Alzheimer's disease specifically, but it applies to other types of dementia. And it'll tell you about the causes and the different symptoms associated. So if we can take 3 minutes to show this, is it possible to turn down these lights so it's easier to see the slides? Thank you so much.
Thanks for helping to do your part. Learn more at www.aboutalz.org.
I like that video because it provides a great overview of the disease process. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more of the stages of dementia and Alzheimer's specifically. So part of the crucial need to plan is to know what is the trajectory, where are we going from here, from a day of diagnosis until the end of the disease. And so the Alzheimer's Association has divided the stages into these 5 different areas. Where preclinical Alzheimer's disease, where you don't have symptoms, but possible biological changes in the brain, followed by mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, where there's mild symptoms, but they don't usually interfere with daily function. Then once you're into the official Alzheimer's disease dementia diagnosis, there's the mild stage, where symptoms interfere with some function, moderate stage, where symptoms interfere with a lot of functions, and in severe stage, which you saw, is where someone needs 24-hour care. Now, a caveat is, although these arrows are equal size, they're not the same length of duration, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So the preclinical stage, many of us in this room are probably in this stage where we have no symptoms, but some of those plaques and tangles are probably starting to develop in our brain, which in the future may lead to Alzheimer's disease, or they can be plaques and tangles and you never show any symptoms. It depends on your brain's ability to compensate for those changes in the brain. And research has shown that these changes can occur 15 to 24 years prior to any symptom management, which is why clinical trials are so important to try to find a treatment early that can stop the deposit of those plaques and tangles. So this is what a normal brain looks like. So if you took a little slice of your brain tissue, this is the dimension that's showing here. And you can see that it's a nice, full, plump slice of your cortex. The hippocampus and the entorhinal cortex, as mentioned in the video, is where memories are stored. And you can see they're totally normal there. And if you look at a PET scan, which is an imaging technique that measures brain activity through the uptake of glucose or sugar of the neurons in the brain, you can see this is a nice active brain, red, yellow. That shows a lot of neuronal or brain cell activity. So next is mild cognitive impairment. The duration of this stage is around 2 to 5 years, depending on the time of diagnosis. This is where you do see measurable brain changes. So compared to the PET scan before, you can see there's a little bit more of that blue-black space where neurons are dying, and a little bit less activity in the brain. This is where someone might experience subtle changes in memory, language, and thinking, increased forgetfulness, poor attention span. This is noticeable to the individual. They're like, I'm forgetting more than usual, or I'm losing things, I'm missing appointments. And close family or friends might notice these changes, but in a day-to-day social situation like this, it's not noticeable. And then 1 in 3 develop Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia within 5 years. However, it's important to note that persons with mild cognitive impairment, not everyone goes on to develop a dementia. Some people stay in the mild cognitive impairment stage for the duration of their life. And sometimes people get better when you treat some of those underlying medical conditions that may be causing problems with thinking or memory. Next is the mild stage. This duration is around 2 to 4 years. There again are changes occurring in the brain. This graphic shows the spread of plaques and tangles as mentioned in the video. The bottom image is the red are those tangles in the brain, and you can see it's affecting those memory centers. And the top image that's in green are the plaques spreading throughout the brain. There are noticeable changes in memory, language, and thinking skills. So symptoms like coming up with the right word. Someone might say, hand me the thingamajig for the box when they're talking about the remote control, right? Have you guys experienced this? Or what's it called? The thingamajig, what you call it? So coming up with the right name for objects, misplacing items. Where are my keys? Where's my wallet? Where are my shoes? Some of us do that now, and occasionally that's normal, but when it becomes an everyday occurrence, that's a problem. Trouble reading and retaining information. A person might read 3 lines and then forget what they read, have a hard time following the story in a television show. Symptoms like that. And then they'll show impairments in instrumental activities of daily living. So instrumental activities are tasks like driving. They're complex tasks. Cooking your favorite recipe, managing finances, tracking your medication, some of those complex tasks. That's where you all as caregivers are going to have to step in and help with those daily tasks. The moderate stage, this has an asterisk because this is typically the longest stage in the disease. And again, these averages are based on population data. Every individual with dementia has their own trajectory and their own phases through these stages. On average, it lasts about 2 to 10 years. This is where you can see those tangles are taking over more of the brain. The plaques have pretty much covered the whole cortex. And then this PET scan, you can see more and more of that blue space that signify cell death in the brain. Now, in this stage, there's more significant problems with memory, language, and thinking skills. Again, reading is difficult. Having the person recall personal information, they may lose some of that, like where they went to college, where they were born, those sorts of personal facts. They may get confused easily as to what day is it, where am I, what year is it, and this is where people are at risk for wandering or getting lost. And in this stage, an individual needs assistance with basic activities of daily living. And basic tasks include things like getting dressed in the morning, being able to eat, take a bath, basic self-care needs. So again, the caregiving demands across each of these stages become more intense. Also in this stage, you may notice personality and behavioral changes. So my grandma, KK, was always a cantankerous woman and swore like a sailor and was just a feisty older lady. And when she developed Alzheimer's disease, I didn't recognize her. She was so pleasant and sweet and caring. I was like, who are you? So I guess that was a positive change. Sometimes it can go the other direction though, where someone may become really angry and bitter and aggressive and not the person you knew. Also, some mood changes can happen here. Depression, anxiety are common, and other sorts of personality and mood changes. The severe stage, so typically this is around 1 to 3 years, and you can see here compared to the previous slide, you can see that the brain is shrunk, which is called atrophy. Those neurons have died away. The area where the hippocampus is basically gone. So a person's unable to store any information or recall information. And then the plaques and tangles have taken over pretty much the entire brain. And in this stage, a person's ability to communicate is greatly diminished, if not totally gone. They may be completely unaware of their surroundings, except for those slight glimmers of lucidity that Dr. Blanche mentioned. And a person is usually bedbound and requires 24-hour care in this stage. As the video mentioned, if someone does not die of another disease prior to the fatality of Alzheimer's disease, the brain and heart, the brain loses the ability to regulate breathing and heart rate. Another common issue is that swallowing becomes difficult, which can lead to food particles getting in the lungs and causing aspiration pneumonia, if you guys have heard of that. Okay, so now that you know the stages and the long course of this disease, it's important to start planning. Again, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Planning is so important for your own well-being as well as the individual with dementia. So I'm going to cover a few different aspects of the planning process. So first, advanced care planning in the terms of healthcare needs, financial planning, long-term care planning, and then funeral burial planning. Okay, so many of you are here to get education, and maybe you've received a diagnosis or you just suspect maybe something's going on with your mom, dad, partner, husband. But there's a lot of good reasons to get an early diagnosis. This is a survey done by the Alzheimer's Association asking people, okay, why, in your opinion, was it important for you to get an early diagnosis? And a lot of these responses are related to planning. So the most common response is it would allow me and my family to plan for the future. And the key phrase there is me, because the earlier you plan, the more opportunity there is for the individual with memory loss to be an active part of that planning. If you wait too long when their thinking skills and memory is too impaired, they're not able to be an active part. Then I could address safety issues ahead of time. So there are a variety of different safety issues. Driving's a big one. Safety in the home. You don't want to worry about leaving a stove on or fires, wandering. So you can address some of those in advance. It would encourage me and my family to seek education and support resources. So congratulations, you're all here. You're getting education, resources, and support. So this is a huge step in this planning process. It'd give me time to assemble medical and caregiving teams, which I'll talk about later. So putting those teams in place is instrumental for you as caregivers not to burn out and have the support you need over the 8 to 10 year range that this disease lasts. Now, why else is it important to plan? Because it breaks my heart when I hear comments like this. I wish I knew what mom would want. I feel so guilty about placing my husband in long-term care. Did I make the right decision? Would my brother want to die in the hospital? These can burden caregivers and decision makers for the rest of their life. It's a huge source of bereavement complication, guilt, anxiety, depression. Having conversations early, planning, talking with your loved one who has dementia can prevent this, and this is huge. So putting on my research hat, because that is one of my main areas of work at the University of Utah, I study advanced care planning in dementia. And the research has shown a variety of benefits to planning early. It reduces anxiety for you all as a caregiver, as well as the person with dementia, because imagine how scary it is not knowing what's going to happen to you in 5 years, not knowing where you're going to live or who's going to take care of you. Having those conversations reduces that fear and anxiety. Minimizes family conflict. So a lot of times when it comes to long-term care decisions, healthcare decisions in the hospital, if families have not had these conversations early, there's a lot of fighting. Well, mom would want this. No, I know mom, and she would want this. Well, I'm the oldest, so I get to make the decisions. Any of you experience this? Think about this in your own families, or you can foresee like the battleground. So minimizing family conflict by planning early, having conversations, and documenting wishes. Better bereavement outcomes, as I mentioned. If Do you feel at peace with the decisions you've made for mom or dad or your partner or brother? You're going to be able to go through the grieving process better, with better outcomes and less guilt and anxiety and those questions of, oh, I wonder if. It has a lower burden on the person making the decision making and increases their confidence. Like, okay, I can make this decision. It's a hard one, but I know this is what mom would want. We talked about this. She's okay going to a nursing home at this stage in the disease. Imagine if you knew that, how much that would calm you and give you peace making these hard decisions. And I think most importantly, having these conversations early, make sure that the care that the patient or person with dementia receives aligns with their wishes, right? It's not about what you all want, it's what they want. And that's a really hard thing to get over mentally of, well, I want mom to live forever. I'm going to give her every intervention in the hospital as possible. But mom doesn't want to be on a breathing machine or a feeding tube. So learning what the person wants is really important. So advanced care planning is important for everyone, regardless of whether you have a diagnosis of dementia. Hopefully you all have started talking with your family about what you'd want for health care, maybe completed an advanced directive, which we'll talk about. But in dementia, it's really important to start this early because unlike other diseases, chronic diseases, dementia has a limited window of time where the individual can engage in these conversations. So this busy figure here just shows different death trajectories. So the top figure here shows a really quick decline, and that's the case in most types of cancer. And the person typically has their cognitive abilities until the very, very end of the disease when they're actively dying. And then the middle figure here shows intermittent decline, where there's some drops in health, recover, drops in health, recover, and that is typical with diseases like congestive heart failure or COPD. But again, unless there's dementia, that person can talk about their care and preferences until the very, very late stages. However, with dementia, which is this lower graph, it's called prolonged dwindling, which is kind of a sad term, but it's a gradual loss in function. And unlike these other diseases, people with dementia are going to lose their cognitive skills early on. So you all as caregivers are going to be making lots of decisions for the individual. So you got to have those conversations early, get diagnosed early. And you need to think across the disease trajectory. So, okay, mom, you have mild cognitive impairment. What do you want now for care? If there was an emergency or you were in the hospital, what would you want when you have moderate dementia? And what do you want when you have severe dementia? So you need to think across stages. And then the individual with cognitive impairment needs to make decisions for their future self, which is tricky because, here we are today. We know what we want today in terms of care, but we have to try to predict and make the best educated decisions of, okay, what would Kara want in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease? What would Kara want in the moderate stages? And what would I want at end of life? Now, with advanced care planning, there are two key parts. So some people just fill out the medical advance directive, shove it in a drawer somewhere, don't tell their family, their healthcare provider. That doesn't do any good. Other people may talk about it at Thanksgiving over dinner, but not document it. That doesn't do a whole lot of good. So the two key parts of advanced care planning are having conversations and documenting. So broadly for advanced care planning, there are 5 Ds of these conversations. You should have regular conversations when there's a diagnosis, like with dementia or some other condition. If there's a death of a family member or friend, that may shift the dynamics in the family and who's going to be your decision maker. Every decade, and broadly, but with dementia, much more often, obviously, if there's divorce or a significant decline in health. This is an ongoing conversation. You don't have it once when you're 20 and then forget about it until you're 80. This needs to be revisited regularly. And I always get questions from people of like, well, I don't want to ruin Thanksgiving dinner by asking mom whether she wants to be cremated or buried in a casket. That's a downer. No one wants to have those conversations, but it's so important to have those conversations. And sometimes people might say, oh, you're just trying to get rid of me. No, and reframe it. Say, Mom, this is for me to honor your wishes. This helps me understand what you want and will reduce the stress. So turn it around as they're helping you by talking about these issues. Documentation, it can be formal in a legal medical advance directive or informal, and just writing down someone's thoughts, what they would like for end of life. Have multiple copies everywhere, make it easy to find so it's not in your safe in the basement that has a 22-digit code, and in case of emergency, no one knows the code, can't get it out. So have it easy to find. And give copies to key players. So again, if it's just in your desk drawer and you're in the hospital, not helpful. Make sure your daughter has it, your neighbor has it, your church member has it, your doctor has it. So make sure to spread the information. Okay, so what do you discuss in these conversations? And it's not just about funeral arrangements. There's a lot of different factors. So you want to talk about someone's preferences, life-prolonging interventions. Does someone want to be on a breathing machine, to have a feeding tube? Those life-sustaining interventions. Locations for ongoing care. This is huge. Mom, are you okay if you go to assisted living as your dementia advances? Are you okay going to a nursing home? Sometimes they're not okay, but you got to have those tough conversations. Say, Mom, I can't do it in my home for 24 hours. We're going to have to do this. But talk about their preferences. Where do they want to pass away? This is actually a huge preference that people don't talk about. Most people want to pass away in their home or in the home of a family member. Some people are okay passing in the hospital and don't want to put that burden on the family at home. Or there's residential hospice centers. Talk about that. Controlling the timing of one's death. Do I treat mom's pneumonia or not? How long do we want to prolong the disease? Some people consider voluntarily stop eating and drinking. And these are important and hard conversations to have. What type of care do they want to receive? Do they want home health care? Do they want palliative care, hospice care? There's a lot to discuss. And then learning their values will help fill in those gray areas where you're like, oh, we didn't talk about that, but what would Mom want? Well, I know she's concerned about being a burden. That's a huge value to her. So we're going to make decisions that reduce our burden. So that could be a financial burden, it could be an emotional burden, or a physical burden as far as having to dress and groom and cook meals. Quality versus length of life. Some people say, I want to live as long as possible, put every tube in me, every whatever, I'm staying as long as I can. Other people are like, if I'm in pain, I'd rather have quality of life, I'd rather have a shorter life. So talk to them about those values. Decision making. Do they want to make decisions on their own, with the doctor, with the family? Do they want to have no part of it? In the later stages, they can't be involved, but in the earlier stages, they could. A lot of people value independence. They want to stay independent and in their home as long as possible. And then, this has come up in a lot of my research, people are really worried about having their wishes honored. As far as, well, I really don't want any sort of medical intervention, but my son, he's a doctor and he's going to want to do everything to me, and I'm really worried about that. So this is a huge concern. So again, when I say it's about the person with dementia, not you. This is what they want, not what you want. That's hard to differentiate sometimes. And again, talking about these preferences over the disease course is important, so you know at each stage what the person would want. So again, I mentioned my research is in advanced care planning. My team and I developed something called the LEAD Guide, which stands for Life Planning in Early Alzheimer's and Dementia, because we found there wasn't any tool out there that was specific to dementia in terms of planning. There are general medical advance directives that apply in emergency situations, but dementia is unique, as we talked about. So this guide is broken up into 3 parts. And first it talks about what documentation do you have, who's your medical power of attorney, do you have a do not resuscitate order. Then it asks the person to discuss their values of burden, quality versus length of life, decision making. And then their preferences for those areas I talked about. Where do they want to receive their care? Where do they want to pass away? And I'll show you at the end where you can find this for free. And it's a valid and reliable tool. We developed it over several years and it's been published. So this can be used by families and by researchers like myself to measure advanced care planning outcomes in persons with dementia and their care partners. I'm also conducting a study, just a little plug, sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association, that uses this lead guide as a source to empower family members to have these conversations with their loved ones. And there's a few participants in the room. Thank you all. If anyone else is interested in participating in some research, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Okay, healthcare planning. Just show of hands, how many people, if you're willing to share, have a medical advance directive completed? Wow, that is outstanding. That is a lot more than I thought. Most, in the United States, less than 25% of adults have a medical advance directive completed. So you all are ahead of the curve. So it's also called a living will, but it lets doctors know what you want, how you want to be treated if you cannot make your own decisions about emergency treatment. And in the case of dementia, you can't make your own decisions in the later stages. So it's important to fill that out. I'll show you at the end a website that has a Utah medical advance directive. A durable power of attorney for healthcare that appoints a single individual to make decisions on your behalf. It is a legally binding arrangement, and this is great to designate, if you have 6 children, designating one person to make those decisions so there's not a brawl at the end of like, I want to decide, I'm her favorite. No, you're not. She doesn't like you. Who cares? It's legally written. You make the decision. It avoids that last minute scramble and sibling rivalry. And maybe it's not a family member. It could be a neighbor. It could be a church friend. It could be someone else outside of the family. There's other types of medical orders you may want to consider. A do not intubate order, so that's would prevent you from being intubated and put on a ventilator or a breathing machine. Do not resuscitate order. That means if you stop breathing or your heart stopped, they're not going to do cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR on you. And there's another type of order called a physician order for life-sustaining treatment. A POLST, some places it's called a provider order or a medical order. And this is for people who are quite ill. It's likely they're going to end up in the hospital. And this is actually where your healthcare provider writes out medical orders. So if you end up in the emergency room, those orders are automatically enacted. They don't need to talk to your family member. They don't need to find your healthcare proxy. The medical staff just goes with those orders. And then you may want to consider whether you want to be an organ, tissue, or brain donor. Brain donation, there are research centers, especially in the case of dementia and Alzheimer's disease, where donating a brain is really important to advancing the research. So they're able to look at the plaques and tangles or Lewy bodies and match that up with your symptoms and try to find, advances the science of finding a cure or an intervention for dementia. Financial planning. Any of you done that in the room? Already talked about financial planning? Wow. Okay. You guys this is great. So a will, not a medical will, but a financial will specifies how a person's estate, so their property, their assets, finances will be distributed and managed when they die. A great tool here, and my parents have done this, and I'm really thankful. They've already done sorry to be so morbid. I know it's an important topic, but they've already planned their funeral. They've already paid for it. They've already picked out the mortuary. Everything's done. Like, what a gift that you give your family members to have that done. So when they're grieving, when you've passed away and they're so stressed and they're so lost, they're not trying to scramble to find a funeral home or figure out what you want. You can do that in a will. A durable power of attorney for finance. This is, again, a legally binding situation where it designates one person to make financial decisions for you when you're not able to. So again, in dementia, it's very important to have that set up. So if you need to get a reverse mortgage on the house and it's in your name and you have dementia, you need to make sure that your partner, your wife, someone has the ability to make those financial decisions. And making these decisions early, right? Because there's a lot of paperwork you need to sign. And you need to be able to do that when you have capacity, which is a legal term that you understand what you're doing. A living trust names a trustee to hold and distribute property and funds on your behalf when you're not able to. So one of the great things about being a gerontologist is that it's professional. I do research in Alzheimer's caregiving, but it's personal too, right? We're all going to age. We're all going to be caregivers or receive care. And so one little tidbit of information I learned over the years is that nursing home care is not cheap, right? It's very expensive. Medicare covers a little bit, then Medicaid kicks in. What happens when you're on Medicaid? Oh, I hear mumbling.
You go to a dumpy, smelly place?
Well, so that's one factor. You don't have a lot of choices, but for you to qualify for Medicaid, you have to be financially eligible. So you guys ever heard of spending down? That means you have to spend all of your assets, not all of it. They allow you to have a few $1,000s in the end, but you can lose your retirement, your life savings, all of that. So I encourage you all, find an elder law attorney, get your finances in a trust. And there's a lot of rules around this. I'm not an attorney, but last I heard it has to be within at least 5 years of needing Medicaid for your money to be protected. So a lot of people don't know this, and then they've saved their whole life to pass on something to their kids, and mom ends up in a nursing home and it's gone. The finances are gone. So I can't encourage this enough. Long-term care planning. So as we talked about across those different stages of disease, there's more intensive care that's needed. And researching these types of care, going to check them out. With the person who has cognitive impairment, go visit an adult day program. Even if they don't need it now, go check some out. So you know, hey, I wouldn't mind going here. This is a nice place. Go check out some assisted livings or nursing facilities early in the process. Again, to help them be part of the process of making decisions and help you feel more comfortable about your decisions. Out there in the lobby, there's great vendors, great resources. 2 things you should pick up: Senior 55 book and a Senior Blue book. I don't know about you guys, but doing internet searches, it's so tiring. And you get stuck in a rabbit hole, you don't know where to click or what's legit. And here, paper resources. This is your yellow pages of services for adult day center, for home health care, for independent living, assisted living, nursing home care. So go grab these. Home health care is a great option. Have someone come into the home and help with some of those basic activities of daily living. However, you get a plan for these. It's not cheap. Last I heard, and maybe it's even more now with inflation and COVID, it's about $40 an hour. So you need to plan financially for these types of care. Adult day programs, there's a flyer out there for Neighborhood House, which is downtown. It's a wonderful adult day program that provides activities, supervision for people in the more advanced stages of dementia. And that gives you a break, right? It gives you a break to go to the grocery store, to take a nap, to get a pedicure, to do that self-care that you need. And those vary in cost. A lot of places will do a sliding scale fee based on your income and what you can afford. Jewish Family Services is out there as well. They have a lot of great support programming. So check out the lobby during the break. Assisted living is kind of an intermediate step. Mom's not safe to stay in her home by herself. I'm afraid she's gonna burn the house down. It's too big, she can't manage it. Assisted living provides environment where the staff can support the person with those complex tasks. They'll manage your medications. They provide food so someone doesn't have to cook. They'll provide transportation to the doctor, groceries, so mom doesn't have to drive. But again, insurance doesn't really cover this unless you have really good long-term care insurance, and this costs $3,000 to $5,000 a month. So people don't realize this. They're like, oh, I got insurance. My Medicare Advantage will cover assisted living, right? No. So planning ahead, looking at your policies, your Medicare, your Medicaid, long-term care insurance, make sure you know what is covered and prepare financially. Skilled nursing facility, again, that's usually reserved for the end when someone needs 24-hour care. And there are a variety of quality levels of nursing homes. So again, I encourage you, don't wait until that crisis moment where, oh, I can't take care of mom anymore. This weekend, I got to put her in a nursing home. Then you're frantic, you haven't done your homework, you haven't visited places, and you're going to feel really anxious about that decision. So take time, maybe one day a month, you go visit a facility and just check it out, talk to the staff, so that not in that crisis moment, you're having to make these knee-jerk decisions, okay? And I know it's so hard to think about that way. Like, that's so far off, but you never know. Mom may fall tomorrow and break a hip. Then what are you gonna do? So I get to be the keynote that talks about dementia and death. But again, important topics, and end-of-life planning, talking about whether someone wants to be on hospice or palliative care. Hospice is such a wonderful resource, but unfortunately, people don't take advantage of it early enough. Do you know what the average length of time someone's on hospice is? Any guesses? 6 months, 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 years, 7 days. 7 days. Typically, people don't bring in hospice until someone is actively dying. And that's a shame because they provide such wonderful service. And someone's eligible for hospice if a doctor says that it's likely that they'll pass away within 6 months. So that's 6 months of support that you can get for yourself. Someone comes in, spends time with your loved one, you can take a break. They provide you with emotional support. They have chaplains, nurses. It's someone for you to talk to, someone for you to grieve with. It's a wonderful service, and people don't take advantage of it early enough. So think about that when you're reaching that stage. Location of death, like we talked about, where does someone want to pass away? Maybe visit some of those options. What does the person want in terms of how they want to be remembered? They want a traditional funeral, a memorial service, celebration of life. Have those conversations early. Put it in your will if you can. Have it paid for, planned. Make it a party. Celebrate your wonderful life. Burial options, again, cremation versus other types of burials. And then if you are an organ, tissue, or brain donor, you need to have those phone numbers available and when the person passes away, because there's a limited amount of time to get the person to the hospital to make that a viable option. So make sure you have that information all lined up and planned, and that lots of people have those phone numbers in case you're not there when it occurs. Okay, so caring for you all. This is a long journey, and it's a lot, right? This isn't just a few months of caregiving and then you can go to Hawaii and go on a spa retreat and recuperate, right? This is years of a journey. So how do you care for yourselves so you don't burn out? Because if you burn out, what happens to your loved one with dementia, right? So remember, self-care is not selfish. So we're going to talk a little bit about dementia caregiving, specifically stress and preventing burnout. So there are challenges specific to dementia caregiving, and this is not to minimize other type of caregiving, but dementia caregiving, because of the cognitive loss, has some more stress. Again, you have to deal with cognitive deficits that get worse over time. There's the behavioral changes. There might be aggression, personality changes, apathy. Keeps wanting to move on me. Continuous care that becomes more intense over time. Finite resources in terms of money, insurance, family help, energy. Safety issues. Driving is important, Dealing with driving, financial scams. This has a mind of its own, sorry. Wandering. And then there's grief. This is, as Dr. Morrison said, the long goodbye, right? This is where, even though the person's physically still there, you're having to say goodbye as they're personhood slowly diminishes, and they're not the person you used to know, and they may not know you. I mean, that's heartbreaking. So there's a lot of challenges. And with those challenges cause stress. How many of you in here are stressed with your caregiving responsibilities, right? That's typical, that's normal. So acute stress, like what I'm experiencing here, I'm talking in front of all of you all, my heart rate's going, I'm alert, my pupils are dilated. That's your fight or flight response, your adrenaline system. It's okay for short periods of time, it can be helpful. But chronic stress is not helpful. So these are all the impacts of chronic stress. Cause depression, it can cause you to get sick more, it can impact your thinking abilities. Has anyone been really stressed and you're like, I can't remember anything. Walking into a room, I don't know why I'm there, I drove somewhere, I don't remember driving. It can cause poor sleep, increased inflammation. And so they call dementia caregiving, it's called a tragic irony, where sometimes the person with dementia is declining, but then the individual caring for them is also declining because you're not taking care of yourself, because it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And you don't want to have that ironic tragedy. You don't want a Shakespearean play in your life. You want to be as healthy as you can so you can provide the best care to that person with dementia. So how do we avoid burnout and some of this stress? You want to create a professional team. These are people who are going to be with you through the long haul. Your doctor, your nurse, a social worker, your bishop, someone in your church, your neighbor. This is a team who's going to advocate for you and on behalf of the person with dementia. You want to communicate clearly and regularly and take notes, because remember, stress, brain fog, don't know where you were, what you were doing, what you talked about. You know, this is a group to commiserate with, to praise each other's accomplishments. This is your tribe, per se, that's going to help you through this process. And use professionals as a source of education and mediation. I have keys here, because who's had to take keys away from mom, dad? Anyone done that? It's worst, right? That's what caregivers report. That is the worst thing as far as taking someone's independence away, is trying to say, you know, mom, you're not safe to drive. I'm going to take those keys away. Mom finds the keys. She goes out anyways. You're worried. Make your healthcare provider the bad guy. You know, it'd be like, mom can't drive. Have the doctor tell her that. So you can say, you know, mom, it's not my decision. Dr. Smith said you can't drive anymore. It's not safe. Right? That's what they're there for. Don't make yourself the bad guy. Use the professionals in your life to help mediate those situations. Or if there's family conflict over what type of care you want to provide, use them. That's what they're there for. And then create an informal team. I can see that the Blanches have a wonderful informal team of support, and they're very blessed. There are people in your life that want to help. Let them help. Let them in. So identify those informal supports, family, friends, neighbors, church members. Keep them informed and use them. How many of you, and I do this myself because I have some children with some challenges that need extra care, are so worried about asking someone for help? Oh, I don't want to burden them. They have enough going on in their life. Well, they're taking care of their grandson. I can't ask. I'll feel too bad, right? I see some heads nodding. People want to help. They see you in this situation and they feel helpless. What can I do? Let them help. It's easy to be prideful and not want to burden other people, but you will burn yourself out if you do not expand your care team. I guarantee you, you will burn out. So it is not selfish to ask for help. Use support groups and educational programs. I'll talk about some of those resources later. Say thank you to all those who are helping. People like to feel appreciated. Thank the primary caregiver. That's a day-to-day grueling task. Make them feel appreciated and valued. There are a lot of cool apps out there right now for care planning. This one's called Care Zone, where if you say you don't want to ask someone to mow your lawn or take mom to the doctor, you can post tasks on there. Say, I need someone to weed my garden. I need someone to run to the grocery for me. Someone can provide a lasagna on Monday night, that would be great. You post the need, and then your friends and family can say, oh, I'm free Tuesday. I can, make some food, or I can, I need some exercise. I'll go mow the lawn, and they can sign up for tasks. So that way, it fits both of your schedules and your needs. And if you're not into the technology, you can just do a general paper calendar. Find some system where you're getting that ongoing support.
What did you say that was called?
Care Zone. And there's another one called Lots of Giving Hands. There's a variety of these types of apps that are available. It's really cool technology. I know another family who weren't into apps, but they use Facebook. And they set up a private group of their informal care team and would post on Facebook, hey, mom needs to go to the dentist on Thursday. I'm exhausted. Who can take her? And someone would reply, I'll take her. So come up with that system. I'm getting the look from Batman here. The mic? Is it? Okay, sorry. Okay. All right, next set, reasonable short-term goals, attainable goals. Don't say, I'm going to do spring cleaning this weekend while I'm caring for my husband with advanced dementia. Not going to happen. Not reasonable, not attainable. Keep attitude and functional goals. It's really hard as a caregiver to not get impatient or grumpy or cranky or resentful, right? Those are all natural emotions. So try to keep attitude goals. You're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect. But every day, strive to be the best that you can. And functional goals. Make sure you go for that walk every day. You're doing deep breathing. You're doing your mindfulness app every day. Anticipate setbacks. So I have a personal note, a son on the autism spectrum. And I have learned, I'm kind of a type A organized person, but through this caregiving journey, I have learned to be flexible and adapt. If we're going to the grocery store and I have a 20-minute window, that's when he's going to throw a meltdown, right? We're going to be there forever. I'm going to be grumpy. He's going to be dragging him out of the store without my groceries for dinner. And you just have to anticipate, it's not going to go well, potentially. What's plan B? It's okay if it doesn't go well. I'm not a failure. So get that word out of your mind. I didn't fail. This is just a caregiving situation, right? Accept praise for your effort. You all are here, so that's a wonderful first step. I can tell that you all want education and resources so you can provide great care. You have a good heart. You are caregivers. You are doing the right thing. You know your family members' personality and what they need. So give yourself a pat on the back. And again, you're not going to be perfect, and it's okay. Self-compassion is so key in this caregiving journey. Some long-term goals, as we talked about, make sure you're preparing, growing. So your relationship is going to change over time. So take the time to look through photo albums, to reminisce, to have conversations about the past, about the present, and those hard conversations about the future. Develop yourself as a human being. What's the old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? There's something to that. You're like, I can't do this, but you do it. Every day you do it, you get up, give yourself a pat on the back, learn self-care, resiliency, strength, and leave a legacy of appropriate caregiving. So unfortunately, elder abuse is a common problem. And those of you in this room are probably like, oh, who would do this? What monster? But it happens. And it happens to good people with good intentions. You're sleep deprived. Mom slept 30 minutes last night and was wandering. You haven't gotten a good meal in a week. You are working double shifts at work. You are tired. You are stressed. It is easy to get angry. It is easy to yell, to belittle the person, to scream at them, to hit, to whatnot. Know your limits. Another personal story is my oldest son had colic. He was premature and he came home early. He had colic for 6 months. My husband was in residency, not around, and hours. I would sing the Eagles to him a lot, and he would just scream and scream. Maybe it wasn't his taste of music, but 5-6 hours straight screaming in my ear, and I was so tired and so stressed. And we were in Phoenix. I had no family, limited support, and there was one point where the little what is it called, video you watch in the hospital about never shake a baby. And I remember watching that in a hospital and being like, why are they showing me this? Like, I'm a good mom, I would never do that. But there was that moment where like, oh my God, I know why they show this video. Because it can happen, and it can happen to good people and good caregivers. We all have our limits. So I went outside, I knocked on my neighbor's door, I said, here, I'll be back in half hour, I need to take a break. And I walked away. But that was a really humbling experience. So don't reach that limit. Don't burn out, use your care team. Take a break. As again I said, don't be the only person in your situation, have a team. So that you can go exercise, you can take a vacation, you can get those breaks, hug someone, meditate, whatever your thing is to de-stress. Avoid self-destructive choices. It's so easy after a long day. I'm guilty of it, right? You grab your chocolate, your glass of wine, you Netflix binge for 6 hours I'm watching Sweet Magnolias right now. It's great, but it's not great coping. I probably should have gone for a run or gotten a good night's sleep, and the next day I'm like, oh, why did I do that? It's easy to get in self-destructive comfort coping cycles. Do your best, tell someone, have them hold you accountable, do the healthy things like exercising, going out with friends, getting good sleep. Okay, that's a lot of stuff I just told you. So where can you find some of this information? First of all, Alzheimer's Association here in Utah is fantastic. They have a booth outside. Go visit them. They can tell you about their resources. They have support groups in person and virtual. They have a list of those out on their table. I co-lead a virtual support group the first Thursday of the month with a social worker at the University of Utah, and love to see some of you there. They have a 24-hour helpline, whether you need advice, you just need to vent, you need to cry. They're all master's level trained professionals. And they have a lot of great education on their website. This link is the place where you can find an elder law attorney. There's not a ton of them, but this will help you locate them. Elder Care Locator is similar to this, where it helps you find services in your area. Utah Commission on Aging has a whole section on advanced care planning and links to the Utah documents. Senior Blue Book, there's some out there. They have a website as well as the paper copy. The Utah Geriatric Education Consortium, which I am a part of. I'm the community education outreach on that. We have a variety of resources. In short, we're funded by, this is your tax dollars at work, we're funded by the Federal Health Resources and Service Agency to increase knowledge about aging and improve care to older adults. We have a wonderful website. It's utahgwep.org, and we have a bunch of education that's on the website. And we have, specific to you all, fireside chats. I host these monthly. It's the first Thursday of the month at 10 a.m. on Zoom. They're recorded and put on the website. And there's a whole plethora of amazing speakers from the community. Some of those speakers are here. Rosemary Quattrell, Kathy Nelson, and our next speaker is on June 2nd, talking about family violence in the older victim. But you learn a lot about community resources through those fireside chats, so I encourage you to check that out. And I did go over into the break a little bit, but I'm happy to entertain questions. You can email me if you have questions or interested in research or need some resources, and that's my office phone number. And these slides in the recording are going to be posted on the Lynden Legacy website, so if you're trying to frantically write down web addresses, don't worry, it'll be posted. So with that, are there any questions? Yeah. Who provides hospice care? There are a variety of organizations, and depending where you live in the Utah area, some are nonprofit, some are for-profit. But again, look in these books and you can find out what hospice service is in your area. Yeah.
Also find out if Medicare will cover
Oh, yes, and good advice. Find out how their payment options work, if they'll accept Medicare or private pay. Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned something dwindling. Was it twilight dwindling? Is that what you
Prolonged dwindling.
Thank you.
And then respite care, that's where I was thinking you could be on longer term on respite, right?
On hospice care?
On respite. Respite care.
Oh, respite?
Yeah.
Respite care, you can start that now.
Yeah, that's what.
Yes, and again,
On and off that,
yes.
And I hate to stop
Oh, it's okay,
you
that's okay.
because you've done an awesome job, and thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. But we need to move on because we have a lot of fabulous speakers that have yet to present. And
Okay.
if you have questions.
Thank you.